Yamaha Tracer 9, Royal Enfield Himalayan 411. Which one costs the more to run? Moving from outside to inside, because it started raining a little bit in the UK, these are the various categories that I'm going to be looking at, because everybody thinks of running costs as just things like fuel basically, maybe taking tyres into account, but there's quite a lot to look at. So we're looking at fuel, the insurance and the tax that you have to have on the bikes in the UK, and the servicing. Tyres has got a little asterisk there because I've got through 3 Tracer tyres, 2 of those being down to punctures. Oil, which only applies to the Himalayan. A brake service, which applies only to the Tracer. Bloody dear in dropping the Himalayan. Depreciation is another big thing that you might not think about taking into account when it's on the running costs. So we're going to be looking at me keeping the bike, part exchanging or selling it privately. And then we'll come to a big total of how much this is going to set me back riding per mile. And these figures are going to be a little bit scary and might be a fair bit more than you thought they'd be. That's the rows taken care of. So we also have 3 columns, the Himalayan, the Tracer if I didn't run into a deer or have 2 punctures, and the Tracer because I did run into a deer. Strictly speaking, the deer ran into me, and the 2 punctures. First thing that everybody thinks about when I think of running costs is the fuel, how much it costs to go out for the day on your bike, excluding fuel for yourself at the various excellent cafes that we can find around the country. So looking at an average fuel cost of about £1.50 a litre, which is getting on for £7 a gallon. That's a British or imperial gallon, not a US gallon, which is less volume, so you can't really do a direct comparison. It's costing me 9p a mile in fuel to run the Himalayan at about 75 to 80 miles per gallon. The Tracer's pretty good on the fuel as well, running at the low 60s, so that's about 11p a mile, 2p a mile more to run the Tracer. Insurance and vehicle excise duty, or road tax as it's called in the UK. For the Himalayan, it was 80 quid. For the Tracer, it's £110, £111 now. I've only included 1 set of tax in these because the road tax is included in the on-the-road price of bikes. There's 2 ways of looking at insurance and VED. It's the pence per mile or the pounds per day. I've had to estimate my insurance costs because I have a multi-bike policy, but these are the best I could get for my own circumstances. So it's about 7p a mile for the Himalayan, 10p a mile for the Tracer, or £1.07 a day based on 2 years, one of which is a leap year, and £1.66 a day for tax and insurance. Of course, the more miles you do, the more servicing you need to get done. The Himalayan has 3,000 mile service intervals. The 6,000 and 12,000 miles are fairly major one as well, especially the 12,000 one. That's new fork oil, new brake fluid, and quite a lot of time in the workshop. So although the Himalayan does seem to be a simpler and cheaper bike, the extra servicing means I'm paying about 12p a mile to keep the bike serviced. The Tracer comes out at 7p a mile. The service intervals are further apart. I haven't had the major 24,000 service done yet, which is the valve one. That's going to be about £700 to £800 I reckon. So at 25,000 miles I'll probably be doing another one of these. Next on the list we have the consumables. Chain and sprockets, tyres, oil for the Himalayan because it will use a bit if you run it at the top end of the rev range, and also a brake check on the Tracer because it felt like they were getting a bit tight, so I took it in and they gave the front brake fluid clean out for me. Total of 4p a mile for the Himalayan, 5p a mile if we ignore the 2 rear tyre punctures that I had on the Tracer. Taking those tyres into account, one at 900 miles, one at under 3,000 miles, comes out to an extra 4p a mile, 9p a mile total running costs for the Tracer on the consumables front. Into every rider's life there's going to be wildlife and gravity. I dropped the Himalayan a couple of times trail riding, no damage, dropped it once on the drive, broke the front brake lever, hence the 2p a mile for that. Tracer running into the Muntjuk, nearly £1,200 worth of damage, so that's 10p a mile for the repairs to the Tracer. Obviously, with buying a new bike you do get depreciation as well. That's the price of the bike when you bought it to the price when you sell it or part exchange it, or even for this example keep the bike. So I bought 2 new bikes, rode them away from the dealer. As soon as I put my key in the ignition they're devalued a bit. They've both lost between 50 and 60% of their value. So that gives you an idea of over 20 months and 12,000 miles how much a bike loses. Selling the Himalayan privately, I could expect to get somewhere in the region of £2,500 for it. Trading it in about £2,000, of course there's always a bit of negotiation room, and keeping it, obviously I don't get any trade-in value. So the depreciation figures go from 31 pence to 70 pence for the Himalayan, depending on if it's a private sale, part exchanged or kept. For the tracer, so these are between £1.21 a mile keeping the bike to 50 pence a mile for doing a private sale. This private sale is approximately £7,000, the trade-in about the 6.5 mark, so you can see how much I've lost by keeping the bikes. Taking all these figures into account, we come to the final sums down here. If I keep the Himalayan, it's going to cost me just over £1 to run per mile. Based on 12,000 miles, depreciation is going to be less in the future. There'll be servicing costs, insurance and tax are rising all the time, so they'll go up. So maybe I need to do another one of these at about 50,000 miles or so. The tracer is £1.54. If I take the damage into account, it's over £1.80 per mile to run. Again, part exchange, it goes to 67 pence, 87 pence, and if I sold them private, 65 pence and 83 pence per mile to run the bikes. And I'd like to thank Ian Cooper at Cooper Motorcycles and Dave Tompkins at Alf England for supplying me the part exchange and private sales figures for working these out. So overall, the cost of ownership between the two bikes is quite different, about 50 pence a mile different. But it's not quite as straightforward as that when you start taking into account all the other things like servicing. If you don't do 3,000 miles a year, you'll have an annual service, so your pence per mile for servicing will be higher. If you do more miles per year, you've got to get more services done, so then the pence per mile will also be higher, but for a different reason. Tyres, fuel, they all come into the equation. Tax and insurance costs you can't do a lot about. Road tax goes up every single year for bikes. My car hasn't gone up in 7 years, and I don't think it's actually gone up in the whole lifetime of the car, which is about 12 now. So there you have it. There were my running costs. If I wasn't spending the money on the bikes, I'd probably just spend it on different bikes. So I'll get enjoyment out of the bikes. I think those figures are worth it, although they're quite shocking and explains why I'm going grey once I'd worked all these out. Anyway, until the next time, stay safe and try not to worry too much about how much it's costing you to run your bike.